Hello, Joanne. Thank you so much for chatting to me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about Broken Bird. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Sam. Really, really glad to be here.
Absolute pleasure. I first saw Broken Bird back in July, I think it was, of 2024, ahead of FrightFest. I absolutely loved it. It is a beautiful, beautiful movie. And as we chatted briefly, I've been eagerly waiting for it to be released so that I can share it with lots of other people. So, firstly, congratulations on your debut feature.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your debut feature, not only premiering at FrightFest, but opening FrightFest 2024. That was incredible. Well
Yeah,
done.
well,
Um, I think very well deserved. And that year I absolutely loved that you opened the festival with a beautiful movie, female directed, about a female protagonist with very feminine storylines and things. And then closing the festival
yeah.
was The Substance with Coralie Farge. So I'm I'm definitely one of those people who will champion women in horror and die on that hill. So to have women open and close that festival, that was a huge year. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that must have been probably very intimidating, but also exciting.
Yeah, yeah, it was, gosh, it was incredibly exciting. I couldn't believe it when I got the phone call from Alan, actually, and he said, "How would you feel about it?" And I said, Alan, could you just give me a while, just give me a day to think about it? Because that hadn't entered my head at all that it would be the opening film of the festival. And it's so typical of me to kind of go, do you think, and then I had a little word with myself and said, Joe, for Christ's sake, what? Just say yes and say thank you and get on with it. Um, and I was so grateful and honored to be part of that festival because I love Fright Fest. I love everyone there. I love the guys who run it. They have been super supportive to me throughout my career of sort of, making movies, even though this is my directorial debut. I've directed a couple of shorts and co-produced and co-written stuff. So they've always really championed me, which has been incredible, really incredible. Um, and yes, I mean, having Coralie's The Substance as the closing film, it was just having those two bookends, and I was like, oh my goodness me, that is something huge, and it will stay with me forever. I was like slightly overwhelmed by the whole thing, but most amazing experience, and yeah, just incredible, incredible. It's one of those things that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And it was almost like a dream come true, which I nearly jeopardized myself with, which is so typical of me. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed the whole experience. It was amazing.
I think that's probably quite typical of women in general, but as well as in the
Yeah,
film industry, to sort of hide our light under a bushel and have that imposter syndrome of going,
yeah,
oh no, I couldn't possibly do this because whatever reason. And obviously, you've had a long career now in film and a fantastic career with like British indie horror, working with your husband. You've done acting, producing, all sorts of different things. So you've very well versed in the world of film and premiering. Oh my goodness, words! Going to festivals and events and things. But obviously, when you were doing that as a director and it's
yes.
your baby and it's your project, that must be a very different thing. So you are good at what you do, but you still have that fear, I
Mm.
guess, and that's probably something that's inherent in a lot of women in film, and that's probably why we don't see more women at film festivals.
Yes, I think it is systemic in our society at large, especially within the film industry. And I think most filmmakers, whether they're women or men, do have that imposter syndrome. But I think it's very easy for women to sort of hide behind the curtain. I know it is for me sometimes. And it's really great when you get that kind of opportunity, like Fright Fest gave me, to actually let the light be on my film and my movie and my cast and all those, myself included. And it's something that we women need to get used to. We really need to push ourselves, and we have to push ourselves, because if we don't, I was lucky. I was really, well, I think, hard work and luck play an integral part with each other,
and talent.
And talent, yes. But I think women have to push themselves. They really do. They're not going to get those opportunities that men necessarily will have. And men are just more confident in that sense, that they think, okay, I'm great, I'm wonderful. Whereas women are, I think, from my experience and the people that I've spoken to, we're working on so many different levels, and we're thinking about all these different things and not always about ourselves. So, it's time for us really to sort of be in the spotlight and make really interesting stories and have the sort of female protagonists which are interesting, diverse, not necessarily the victim, the mother, the girlfriend, whatever. We are all those things, but so much more. And it's fascinating and interesting and compelling. And I think people want to watch that. They want to watch women doing crazy things and not being boxed into a pigeonhole. I know that there are some exceptions to that over the sort of decades, but I think it's really coming into the fore now. When you have people like Coralie, and you've got Prana Bailey Bond, and you've got so many, Rose Glass, you've got these incredible women directors who are interesting, and their characters are interesting and nuanced and layered. And I think that's what we all want to champion that.
Absolutely.
Females.
I hate that not I have to, but I hate that when I write or I podcast or I do anything, I feel like I have to champion, it's a female director. This is, this production is all female. We shouldn't have to point that out. I think women are so underrepresented in so many different fields, and especially in film and especially in horror. But what I really love is that within my community, in the horror community, there's so many women who are passionate about horror, and we're all using our voices, whether that is creating videos or podcasting or writing, to bring our experience as women to stories, to relating to different films and things. And I think that's really powerful. So not to be patronizing and saying well done and thank you, but well done and thank you for being a woman in horror, but also being a woman in like British indie horror as well. I love the indie horror community in the UK. We've got some fantastic directors, fantastic writers, Dominic being one of them. So you've had that long experience. It's a big question, but what did you learn from doing so many different roles on so many different films that you could then bring to have? Because I know a lot of it would be confidence, to actually sit down and go, right, I'm going to direct this feature that is mine. What did you learn from sort of all those experiences? Because I know you've had acting experience and production experience, so all of that you can bring to your debut feature then.
Yes. I think the experiences, the hands-on experience is invaluable. I think working in micro budget horror or micro budget movies across the board will give you so much training and opportunity to fail, to succeed, to fail again. And I think that's what it's all about. I think it's just keeping going. And I think when you're doing a micro budget film, you're not going to have all the heads of department that you would love to have. Ordinarily, you're not going to necessarily have the production designer on a small contained indie film or horror film. So you have to make do with what your surroundings are. So that's your set. So you make do with that, and then if you can get a costume designer who can share your vision, so all those sorts of things and you're under a lot of stress because you've got time and you still want to pay all your crew, but you're not necessarily going to pay them. This is when we were first doing our first, particularly with Before Dawn. You're not paying them necessarily the rates that you would like to pay, although they're being paid minimum. It's a massive juggle. And I think, I have done, I've worn many hats, jack of all trades, it feels like. I've done the production designer, I've done the line producing, I've done first AD. I've never worked on, in the camera. That's, I've never done that. But, anything that needed doing on the day, I'll make the tea, anything. It's a kind of, and I think that taught me teamwork and the fact that there shouldn't be, there is hierarchy, it's there, but there shouldn't, I don't feel like there should be. I feel like it should be real teamwork and that we can all work together. Everyone, as long as everyone sort of gives 100%, which they ordinarily do, then we can make a movie. And if everyone's passionate about it, and sometimes the less money you have, the more passionate people are, because they're not doing it necessarily for the bucks, because it doesn't have that. So it's really interesting to see that. So having all that experience, I suppose, stood me in good stead, although I didn't realize it at the time because it could be really, really stressful. And I used to, there were times when I just thought this isn't going to work. I'd go off into a corner and have a quick cry because it was frustrating, and trying to keep everything together and the budget and all these things, all these constraints. So that when I got to be on set with Broken Bird and work with Catalyst and the production team in Belgrade and Serbia, it just felt like I was a kid in a candy shop, because suddenly I had an HOD for every department, and normal things that most people would take for granted. And it was just, I'm not saying it was easier, because it wasn't, but it was, for me, a lot less stress, so that I could just focus on the directing instead of being sort of pulled in different directions. I mean, you are pulled in different directions all the time, but once you're on set, I mean, there are a million things to think about, but it's your vision, and the actors and the shots. So you've done all that prep, and then you can just sort of enjoy it as much as you can until something goes wrong, and then you work it out and then enjoy it again. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience working with that.
Because Broken Bird started life as a short, Sybil,
Yes.
and then went on to become a feature. Do you feel like you sort of created the story a lot smaller because of your experience with working on micro budget and smaller things, and that with having all the heads of departments and things, it sort of grew as you were making it? Or did it sort of always have, because it doesn't feel like a low budget film, it is a beautifully shot film, it's well scored, the sets, the costumes, it looks like a very well produced higher budget movie than it actually is.
Yes.
Did it sort of grow as part of the process?
Are you talking about from when it was the concept from the short film, or the actual when we're filming the feature film?
A little bit of both, I think. Okay. As you realise, oh, we have got some budget to do these sorts of things, did you make it a little bit more grand, I think is a good word, because it looks very sumptuous and lush as a film. Did you sort of go, oh, I'll have a budget and a person, I'm rambling, so sorry, but I'll have a budget and a person to do this, actually, let's write this in?
Yes, well, that's a really good point. Because when we started
I'm glad that made sense, Joanne.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I got it. When we first started working from the short film, which Tracy Shields, it was her original story, and that sort of worked really well, and it was fun to do. We did it in a couple of days, and it was not much. We didn't have much to do it with money wise, but it was my first sort of directing experience, and I always felt that there was much more to the character than what you can portray in sort of 12 minutes. So we developed the story, and we developed it into to a certain degree, and then other films came up or other work came up, so it kind of sort of lost its momentum. And then Dominic, my husband, he wrote the sort of the draft of the screenplay, which when Catalyst Studios got in touch with me, I knew one of the producers there. He got in touch and said, we're doing a slate of female-led movies, and what we really want is a genre story, a genre movie. I know you do genre. Have you got any scripts? And I said, well, yeah, I've got 4 or 5 scripts actually. And then in the back of my head, he wasn't asking me to direct it. He was asking for some scripts because, he obviously had in mind his own directors, which was fair enough. So I said, look, I've got this one script. It's not quite finished. It needs work. But I think it's got real potential. Will you take a look at it? And he said, yeah, send it to me. And I gave him a bit of a brief synopsis. And I said, well, there's only one thing. If you want it, I have to direct it. And I was kind of like, I don't know where those words came from. I just sort of just came out. And he went, okay, fine. Yeah, I'll talk to the team. Anyway, cut a long story short, they liked it. We needed to do work on it. So the script that had been this particular draft that they'd read, they said, right, okay, now you've got this much money. It's still low budget, but it's a lot more than I'd ever expected to work with. It's like $2 million. So, that was like, it was like huge amount of money to me, and to most people, but in the film world, it's still low budget.
Nothing.
Yeah. And so they said, look, we're going to be filming in Serbia. There's a good tax break there. So for films, you've got more to play with. And I was like, okay. So he said, when you do this particular, like the car crash, whatever, do a car crash. Don't be afraid, because I was cutting before the car, so it was all sort of off camera in the dark or whatever, in the black, because I knew that in how it was written with the sort of budgets that we were used to, we wouldn't be able to afford that. So he said, just expand it, just go for it, with the fire and stuff, just go for it. And I was like, really? Okay. And that's how it kind of just developed. They worked with us for about a year, developing it. And, if I'm completely honest, I wasn't sure that it would ever get made. It's one of those things, we get let down so many times in this industry. You sort of go 3 steps forward and 5 back, and 2 steps, 1 back. It's a game of chess, isn't it? And you feel that, is this really going to happen? And then literally 2 weeks before, he said I would be going out there, and I was thinking, it's not happening. It's not happening.
Till you're on the plane.
Yeah, exactly. And he just went, that's it, you're coming out. Here's your, someone will be in touch with your ticket, blah, blah, blah. And it just went really quickly. And that's how it happened. So yes, in answer to your question, we got to really play with toys that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to play with, and expand, which was really great, Yeah, I didn't expect that, but yeah, with that money and filming in Serbia, it really enabled us to, make it a bigger film than it would have been in that sense.
You got a really, really beautiful, visually beautiful film, as well as a beautiful story. And I think the central character of Sybil, played by Rebecca Calder, just a beautiful, beautiful character. And for me, I really found it similar to Amelie, but a much darker version, because Sybil relates to the world in a completely different way than everybody else, much like Amelie does. And just even stylistically, there were lots of like beautiful, dreamlike, whimsical things. And for me, Amelie's always been a comfort movie, and perfect timing, because it's actually the 25th anniversary of Amelie at the moment, and it's back in cinemas.
Yes.
But I've been reevaluating Amelie as a neurodivergent person, of going, oh, okay, I can see Amelie as a neurodivergent person navigating her way through the world. And I think maybe that's why I related to Sybil so much. The tagline about her liking poetry and dead people, very much me. I can definitely relate to that. But is she explicitly neurodivergent, or is she sort of neurodivergent coded, do you think? Because she doesn't feel like she fits into the world with everybody else, and that's how I feel on a daily basis.
Yeah. Sybil doesn't fit into the world. She's a square peg in a round hole, and which is something, to a degree I must relate to, because I think we see ourselves in our characters in films as well, and we have to love those characters to be able to sort of develop them and work with them. I don't think it was intentional for her to be in any way neurodiverse. I don't think even Rebecca was, thinking about that. I think she was just being totally truthful and honest emotionally with the character. So although the character is deeply flawed and does some terrible things, she's also really sensitive and very, there's a warmth to her, there's a fragility to her. So there's, and her imagination, I think, is very clear. And that she likes poetry, she likes dead things, she likes to recite her poetry because she lives in her head, but she also loves to put animals, she loves her taxidermy, she likes to look after and nurture things. So she's all these things. And I think, yes, she definitely does fit into that category of neurodiversity, but I think it's also, as people, as women, we are so many things, and not just women. I'm talking, non-binary. We are so many different things. We're not just the one thing, to be pigeonholed as. And that's what I wanted to explore. I wanted to explore someone who was, dark, who was messy, who was funny, who was warm, who was searching for love, all of those things in one person. But as long as it was based in truth, then for me, the audience will be taken on her journey and will be drawn in to her as a character. And I think that's and if that sort of crosses over into neurodiversity, I think that's absolutely great, because I think we all are a little bit neurodiverse. Not to sort of, I don't want to, I think we all have a tendency to feel isolated on certain occasions. Not always, but on certain occasions, in certain circumstances, we don't fit in. We want to find the nearest exit. So we can relate on that sense, I think, to her. Maybe some people much more than others. I know I can certainly relate to that. I'm always looking for an exit. So, I think I definitely understood her from that point of view. Yeah.
Rebecca plays her so beautifully, and there's so many little nuances to her performance. And I had the pleasure of chatting to her at FrightFest, and I had to keep reminding myself she's not actually Sybil. She is Rebecca, because she just embodied this character so well. And what was lovely about it as well, linking with the neurodivergence, is that clearly she's not doing quite well mentally. She has mental health issues. She's been not neglected, but she's been let down somewhere along the line, and she's not had perhaps the care that she needs. But as somebody who's had mental health issues my entire life, I never felt like anything was sensationalized. I didn't feel like it was a portrayal of a crazy lady or that woman's mental. You quite often have stereotypical portrayals of women who have mental health issues or are neurodiverse, and I didn't feel like that at all. I felt like everything was very sensitively handled, to the point that even though Sybil does things, without going into spoilers, even though she does things that are reprehensible and absolutely terrible, she does so in a way that it breaks my heart that she's going through this, and I think she's very sensitively written and very sensitively portrayed. I think there's something that's really strong that carries through the film, and it's really lovely. And again, I feel like when you have projects that come from women like yourself that have directed the project, women have written it as part of the process as well, there's a lot more sensitivity, I think, sometimes in these sorts of portrayals.
Well, I'll interject actually, because I think
Go ahead, please do.
because I think a lot of this comes down to Rebecca, because she had such sensitivity to the part, and she really dug deep. You know, she really asked many questions. She really wanted to know who she was, where she came from. She did this kind of Bible of who this character was. And we didn't have much rehearsal time at all. So we just tried to grab moments of really going out for coffee and having a good old chat about everything. And which is what I love, you know, coming from an acting background. So I was totally up for that with Rebecca and also the other actors. And I think as a person, she is obviously a very intelligent, talented, empathic woman. And she was happy and brave enough to go to those depths, which were pretty dark in places, you know, because she's not, I never felt, and I hope you feel the same, but I never felt that she ever was acting, being odd. She was it was all grounded in absolute truth. So that was down to her, because she's an amazing actress, as you know, as you can see on the screen when you watch her. She is phenomenal.
Well, if people haven't been completely swayed by me waxing lyrical about how wonderful this film is, can you give a quick synopsis of the film to entice people to the cinemas? Because US audiences are going to be able to see it very, very soon, and UK audiences are going to be able to rent and buy online. Why should they watch Broken Bird?
Okay, well, so the story of Broken Bird is a character-led story that sits within the horror genre, about a lonely mortician who is seeking for love and connection, but it is kind of displaced with her relationship with death. I think there are themes running through this film which I think are universal: grief, loneliness, isolation, disconnection, which I think anyone at some point in their life will be able to relate to. But at the same time, there is a kind of macabre, dark humor to it. And there's a sort of gothic quality as well. And I think there are moments where I think it's still entertaining, although some of the subject matter is very dark. So that was always what I wanted. My eye was always on the audience, that this was going to be a film that moved, but it moved in many places. And that the audience would hopefully leave the theatre still thinking about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really beautiful film that a lot of people are really going to connect with, and they're really going to connect with Sybil and her story. So I can't wait for more people to see it and fall in love with it like I did. So thank you so much for your time today, Joanne. Everybody go and see Broken Bird, because it's a really, really beautiful film. And I really look forward to your next film that will hopefully premiere at FrightFest as well.
Fingers crossed. I've got to get
fingers crossed.
A lot of work to do, but yes.